I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service, and welcome to the Alaska Weather Show on this Friday, July 2nd, 2021. And the long 4th of July holiday weekend is here. And if you want additional weather information, you can always go online to weather.gov/Alaska. If you have anything you wish to share with me or any questions, especially if you got any interesting photos, you can send them to peter.chan@noaa.gov. Well, first thing off bat, we do have some warnings in effect. There is a wind advisory for the eastern Alaska range for wind gusts from the south of 40 to near 50 miles an hour up through late this evening, and then a red flag warning in effect for areas along and north of the Alaska range, including the Tanana Valley, Fairbanks, Eagle, Northway. That's in effect until midnight this Friday late evening. And south winds gusting on the order of 25 to 30 miles an hour, combined with temperatures that have been in the 80s to near 90 degrees in some of the east central areas. Very dry conditions have caused extreme fire danger. So again, anybody planning to do recreating, even though these conditions will be diminishing here as we go through the late evening, and temperatures are expected to cool down a bit. Instead of 80s to near 90, those areas will be back in the 70s for Saturday and 4th of July Sunday. Nevertheless, venturing out, please use extreme caution when handling any fire, camping, or any other forms of recreating. And you see here, high to extreme fire danger is widespread throughout central and east central areas of the state along and north of the Alaska range, including up through the Yukon Flats. And then there's a couple of pockets further south down there at the Copper River Valley, as well as on the north end of the Kenai. So everybody please use caution if you're going to be doing any sort of camping and considering any outdoor burning. Well, looking at the satellite imagery across the region, we have high pressure, a ridge of high pressure, a persistent area of high pressure over northwest Canada, and it's up into east central parts of the state into the northwest, and that feature has allowed for more in the sunshine, warm temperatures, that high access to the sinking air beneath it to kind of compress and warm the lower atmosphere. That's why we've seen temperatures Fairbanks eastward in the 80s to near 90 degrees. But meanwhile, there's cloud cover that's come up from the south. We have this pinwheel of low pressure just kind of sitting out over the Bering Sea, a couple dual double barrel systems, one of them now lifting up just north of Nunivak Island, another one back to the west, and that one is just north of the western Aleutians. And as I put the satellite imagery in motion, you can kind of see that counterclockwise circulation, and circulating around this broader area of low pressure are some smaller waves or troughs of low pressure that just enhance the cloud cover and showers that rotate around. That's why the southwestern third of the state has just been so cloudy and occasionally wet throughout much of June and now the beginning of July. And this pattern is going to continue. I'll show you that coming up when we talk about the 6 to 10 day temperature and precipitation outlook. But otherwise, coming up this holiday weekend, Saturday and Sunday, if you're on the eastern part of the state, especially along the Alcan border or down into the southeast, you could see some sunshine in through the Panhandle. That's where some of the nicer weather is going to be shaping up. But here we are on the weather map today. You can see thermal lows that kind of extend in the central parts interior of the state, but look at those troughs of low pressure just kind of lined up from the southwest down through the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Those features are just going to kind of rotate on up toward the northeast and then pull back to the northwest the further north they get. High pressure ridge remains entrenched there, just centered south of the Gulf of Alaska. And that just kind of keeps trapped marine layer, though I think once we get into Saturday afternoon, especially by Sunday, the southern panhandle will get into a little sun, and Ketchikan could see temperatures back up around or a bit above 70. Not the record highs, though, that they saw earlier in the week. And coming up right after this segment, we have one of our forecasters, Grant Smith, at the Juneau Forecast Office, is going to get an update on some of the flooding that occurred earlier this week along the Taku River there near Juneau. So here is the weather map by Sunday afternoon. Eastern parts of the state, eastern interior, Alcan border, going to see more in the way of sunshine, dry conditions, warmer conditions, though not as hot as we've seen the past couple of days, with still a train of waves of low pressure bringing periods of rain or rain showers there to the Alaska Peninsula, parts of the Aleutians, and especially the western third of the state, and extending eastward along the Brooks Range. The Brooks Range could pick up another half to an inch of rainfall as we go through the course of this weekend. So low temperatures Saturday morning, generally in the upper 40s to around 50 degrees across the southeast as well as south central areas. Highs Saturday afternoon could be back up around or just above 70 at Ketchikan. Off further west along the coast, mainly 50s beneath the cloud cover to near 60 at best, maybe 67 at Glen Allen. Sunday morning, lows mid 40s to around 50 degrees most areas, and then temperatures again Sunday afternoon could be back up around or just a little above 70. The southern inner waterways there of the Panhandle, and perhaps up to about 72 or so at Glen Allen. And everybody else inland will get more into the 60s. Look for lows Saturday morning near freezing along the Arctic coast, lower mid 50s through the upper Yukon Valley toward the Alcan border, but temperatures Saturday afternoon are going to cool down into the 70s instead of 80s to near 90, and we're looking for highs generally 40s along the Arctic coast, 50s the Seward Peninsula. Lows Sunday morning will be in the mid 30s along the Arctic coast, upper 40s, low 50s Yukon River Valley, and high temperatures Sunday, nice, up into the 70s there across eastern and central areas along the Yukon, Tanana rivers. 50s through the Seward Peninsula and 40s along the Arctic coast. Low temperatures Saturday morning are going to be generally in the 40s across much of the southwest, extending out through the Aleutian chain. And beneath the cloud cover, areas of the southwest, King Salmon, Dillingham on up toward Nome, mid-upper 50s with periods of rain showers. And as we go into Sunday morning, more of the same, mid-upper 40s for lows, and high temperatures on Sunday afternoon may get back up to around or a little above 60 the further upriver you go, the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers, and then extending down along the Alaska Peninsula, highs generally in the lower mid 50s and near 50 in the Aleutians. So a quick check here of the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook as we look through July 8th through the 12th. Heat wave, heat dome, huge high pressure system sits over the western U.S. They're really going to bake their Idaho, Nevada, western Utah, but beneath the hottest portion of this feature. Meanwhile, Alaska overall should see below normal temperatures, especially centered on the southern half of the state and south central areas. Precipitation is expected to average above normal, particularly in the northwest along the Brooks Range on over toward Kotzebue. And then areas of the southwest may get a little break, dry out a bit with at least below normal precipitation extending out the length of the Aleutian chain.
Meteorologist Grant Smith here with the National Weather Service in Juneau, Alaska, coming to you today to bring you an update to the flooding that happened along the Taku River. Looks like it peaked at around 45.5 feet Wednesday morning, and it has been going down ever since. Some of the imagery and pictures that have been coming in have been quite impressive. Thank you to everyone who sent in those pictures. Looks like some of the areas did see some damage, but a lot of these pictures that have been coming in have seen water levels just come right up to the cabins, and they have been going down ever since. The short-term forecast, risk for flooding is overall low because we are seeing river levels dropping, and also the forecast is looking dry. Reporting from Juneau, Alaska, I'm meteorologist Grant Smith.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
In our aviation weather going into this weekend, we are looking for IFR conditions to continue along portions of the southeast panhandle coast there in the northern inner waterways and along the south central coast, and then back along the Alaska Peninsula, portions of the west, and out into the Bering. We're going to continue to see a potential for a few isolated thunderstorms to develop with the daytime heating just there north of the Yukon Flats, and also out through the east central areas along the Alcan border and the Yukon River. Otherwise, still a few pockets of IFR conditions along the southeast coast, and also scattered about but very minimized there Saturday afternoon across south central areas and continuing out across much of the Bering. During the day Sunday and starting in the morning, VFR conditions will prevail across much of the interior, especially the Yukon River Valley. And then once we get into the afternoon on Sunday, still pretty good VFR conditions across much of the interior. But back toward the western side of the state, we are looking at IFR conditions along portions of Bristol Bay on up through west central areas, Nunavut Island, and then also up just off of the Arctic and northwest coast, extending southward down across the Bering into the central Aleutians and on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. So past conditions on Saturday, Anaktuvuk, we'll see MVFR become VFR. For Adigan Pass, generally MVFR conditions should hold on Saturday, and there's a potential for a few isolated storms to develop as you fly east of Adigan Pass, especially there east of the south entrance. And for Lake Clark down to Merrill, we're looking at IFR to hold generally during the day Saturday. Rainy Pass may see conditions try to become MVFR later in the morning and afternoon. And then Windy Pass should still see IFR conditions. It'll be that portion of the western central Alaska range seeing IFR conditions becoming MVFR. And same thing at Isabel, IFR becoming MVFR by afternoon. And there could be a possibility of an isolated storm popping up in the vicinity of Isabel Pass. And for Mentasta, generally VFR conditions will hold on Saturday, though the north entrance as you fly more toward the northeast could be an isolated storm. Tanita should see MVFR become IFR, especially on the west entrance. And then for Portage, kind of a split. We'll see the west entrance generally MVFR throughout the day, IFR on the east entrance, including portions of Prince William Sound. And then the northern inner waterways of the southeast Panhandle, Chilkoot and White should see IFR conditions become MVFR on Saturday. Freezing levels generally around or above 10,000 feet across northwest Canada, the Yukon, extending across the Alcan border into east central areas. And then over the southwest, freezing levels around or below 6,000 feet, extending out into the Bering. As a result, this is where the couple of areas, elongated areas of low pressure reside, and as they kind of pinwheel or pivot about, that's where a cooler pool of air aloft will reside. So freezing levels there generally below 6,000 feet. Icing potential could be some along the western arm of the Alaska range above 8,000 feet to about maybe 14,000 feet. And then across the southwest above 6,000 feet to maybe 14,000 feet. And then there in the northwest, Chukchi Sea into the western portion of the Brooks Range above 8,000 to maybe about 14,000 feet. Jet stream level winds are from the south west to west across the southern half of the state, 60 to 75 knots. And then turning around to the southeast there over the northwest upwards to 60 knots in response to that circulation that's centered near St. Lawrence Island, coming down to 9,000 feet. Have high pressure, mid-level high pressure ridging in place there over the Yukon, northwest Canada, and the low pressure areas out over the Bering, so the flow across the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians, generally from the southwest, 35 to near 40 knots. And at 3,000 feet, relatively light winds across most of the state, though as we get out toward the central Aleutians, 30 to 35 knot winds from the west-southwest. And a quick check of turbulence potential, some pockets of turbulence. Yukon Valley surface to 4,000 feet, Alaska Range surface to 8,000 feet, and then there in the southwest, the Kuskokwim Delta could see surface to 4,000 foot turbulence on Saturday. So that's it for your aviation weather. Have a safe flight if you're heading out this weekend.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission, GOLD, the global-scale observations of the Limmendisk instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. GOLD connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The GOLD instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. GOLD collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. GOLD joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We projected by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time, compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track three aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, The salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
In your marine weather segment for this Friday evening, we'll look at today's sea ice edge, and the Chukchi Sea continues to see a lot of open water that has developed there. There's still a little bit of ice left there in Kotzebue Sound, and so that would be kind of just continuing to melt, but could create a little bit of a impedance to some traffic there. Otherwise, along the Arctic coast, the ice continues to break up, but is fairly still present, and we'll continue to see the trend for the breakup to occur there along the Arctic coast as we go through the next week or two. But taking a look now at what we have for our marine forecast heading into the 4th of July weekend, Saturday. Winds northwest, inner waterways, Petersburg down to Ketchikan, 15 knots, 3-footers. Up along Juneau to Skagway, Lynn Canal, 25 knot south winds, 5-footers. And then along the coast, the Gulf Coast, winds northwest 15 to 20 knots, Gustavus to Craig with swells around 7 feet, more of a westerly 10 to 15 knot wind, Yakutat westward toward the Cape there of St. Elias. And then as far as for the day on Sunday, 4th of July, inner waterways will see winds 15 knots or so from the west, northwest, the south end, 3-foot waves, north end, Lynn Canal, south 20 knots, waves 4 feet. And along the Gulf Coast, winds west to northwest 20 knots, swells 7 to 9 feet. And along south central areas, we'll see over the open waters of the Gulf, westerly winds 10 to 15 knots, swells 6 to 7 feet. Inner waterways, including Prince William Sound, south 10 knots, 2-footers, and Cook Inlet 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 5 feet. And then on Sunday, a little bit less in the way of wind. Winds out over the Gulf, southwesterly to westerly, 15 to near 20 knots, and swells around 4 or 5 feet. As we get into Prince William Sound, southwest winds 15 knots, 2-footers, and Cook Inlet, north end, winds out of the north 10 knots, a foot or so, but the mouth of Cook Inlet, look for east-southeast winds 15 knots, waves 3 feet. Across the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, winds will be out of the south-southeast around 15 to 20 knots, swells 7 to 9 feet up through the North Pacific side, 4 feet Shelikof Strait, but 2 to 3 feet with 15 knot south to southeast winds on the Bering side. And on Sunday, winds will generally be have a southerly component, 10 to 15 knots on the Pacific side, swells 4 to 5 feet, and generally 2 to 4 feet on the Bering side, Bristol Bay down toward Cold Bay. And then the Aleutians will generally see south winds on Saturday in the 15 to 20 knot range, swells 6 feet or so on the Pacific side, 4 to 6 feet on the Bering side. And then for Sunday, winds just a little higher, 20 to 25 knots, especially through the central Aleutians, with swells 6 to 8 feet. And then across the west coast, open waters off of Bristol Bay towards St. Paul, St. George south at 15 to 20 knots, 4-foot waves. Offshore flow there as we get up toward Norton Sound and off of Emonac, that area there, we'll see waves 3 to 4 feet. And then on Sunday, look for south winds there over the east-southeast bearing, including St. Paul, St. George with 6-footers and winds south at 20 knots. And as we get up toward the main central western coast, winds will be offshore southeasterly 15 knots and waves a few feet. And then along the Arctic coast, 25-knot winds out of the east with areas of ice, Kaktovik on over to Utqiagvik, and then along the northwest coast, winds will be offshore 20 to 25 knots, Wainwright down to Point Hope, and 6-foot waves there in the open waters of the Chukchi Sea. And on Sunday, look for winds coming down a bit, 10 to 15 knots with ice there along the Arctic coast, and offshore flow generally south-southeast 15 knots with waves of 3 feet or so from the Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait. And look at the weather map. We do have ridge of high pressure nudging up into the Gulf of Alaska on Saturday, and we continue to see low pressure, just broad low pressure over the Bering, with troughs of low pressure rotating up through the region, bringing additional rainfall, especially to southwest portions of the state Alaska Peninsula up through the west coast. So that does it for our show today. Thank you for watching. We have a long holiday weekend, so please enjoy yourself. And if you can, join us again here the next couple of nights. Take care.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.